Marty, but you need to go.
אז אני חושב שהבעיה הזה, שההגדרה שלך של יהודי זה רק יהודי. הרבה אנשים, כמו מי שמקבל אותנו בבית כנסת החדש, ג'פרי, אתה יודע, הוא כתב באתר שלו, אני גם סיני, אני גם טייוואני.
כן, בסדר.
אני גרתי פה 50 שנה, אני גם טייוואני וגם המשפחה האמריקאית שלי קורא לי טייוואני. אז אני גם הייתי טייוואני, לאחרונה. עכשיו אני כבר אינדונזי, כמעט, עוד בדרך. אבל הבעיה זה שהרבה אנשים יכולים להרגיש באותו זמן יהודי ומישהו אחר, מישהו זהות אחרת.
בסדר? תודה. אוקיי, בוא נלמד קצת. Let's learn. Shana, you need to go. This guy, you need to go upstairs. Come, I'll help you go upstairs.
עוד תלמידה?
תלמידה מצטיינת.
אוקיי, the man goes with her.
זה תלמידה מצטיינת.
הביאנו את המטבעות.
Thank you. Say thank you, Marty.
I don't want to dispossess her of
Thank
her
you.
money.
Abba, have fun.
Bye.
Bye.
מלא, זה ממש סוגר שטחים נהיה פה. טוב שהמצלמה...
So both of you were not here last week when we had the Farbrengen for Yud Shvat, and I promised Betzalel that I'll give you a little bit of a review over what we spoke about. So today we're going to concentrate around the same topics. The previous Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, the father-in-law of our Rebbe, passed away on Yud Shvat, on the 10th of Shvat, Tafshin Yud, and this was 1950. And following his passing, then the Hasidim asked the successor, who was bound to be a successor, this is Rabbi Menachem Mendelschneerson, our Rebbe, to become the Rebbe, and then they tried for 1 year to convince him to take upon him the mantle of leadership, and finally after a year he consented. And what was the practice of how he becomes a Rebbe? He gave a ma'amar. Ma'amar is a discourse in which there are several videos that you could see the Rebbe saying a mimer. Usually when the Rebbe was delivering a mimer, a discourse, his eyes were shut and he was sitting though, but everybody around him were standing, and there's a special intonation, there's a melody, almost a sing-song, the way the Rebbe delivers the mimer, and you could see that he's there but not there. He's articulating things from higher realms, right? He speaks words that we can all understand, but the topics that are discussed are sometimes heavenly, and of course, what he always likes to do is make sure it's also practical, because it's great to hear a nice speech, but it's even greater to come out with something that one could implement in their day-to-day lives, as opposed to just hearing an insight and saying, oh wow, that's a great story. The Rebbe always stressed everything we read about, everything we learn about has to be practical, to mean something in our practical behavior. So we'll look at a little bit about the discourse. We discussed a little of last week, as you recall, but today we're going to speak a little more at length and see also how it's related to the weekly portion. Okay, so here is something interesting. When somebody comes to convert, to become Jewish, the first thing I'm supposed to do as a rabbi is tell him it's a bad idea. It's a really bad idea. Now, this is not my own perception, although you told me there are some people who think that this comes from me, but it's not mine. You read it in Maimonides.
I know that this is a practice.
It says 850 years ago, Maimonides writes in his book, in the book of laws that he composed, that somebody coming to become Jewish, you tell him, are you out of your mind? What do you want to be Jewish for? Don't you know The Jews are persecuted. Everybody hates them. Everybody wants to kill them. They don't have a place to call their own. They just everywhere looked as, people of no fame, of no dignity. And no matter if they're successful or they're not, they're always hated. Why don't you turn back and step forward to where you came from, because it's a really bad idea. Now, this is no exaggeration. This is the practice. And in fact, it has to be done 3 times. 3 times to see whether the person is really out of their mind, serious of becoming Jewish. And only then, once they show seriousness, they're brought in and, of course, being learned for the Torah and understand what it means to be Jewish and the practicalities of it. Just as a side note, someone who was born Jewish, it doesn't matter whether they observe the Torah or not, whether they fulfill the mitzvot or not, whether they fast on Yom Kippur, eat matzah on Pesach, whether they're a practicing Jew or a Buddhist monk or a Christian pastor or a Protestant minister or a Muslim imam. It does not matter whatsoever. They can never relinquish their Jewishness. Once a person is born Jewish, no matter what they do, they remain Jewish. Which is not true to someone who wants to become Jewish. Someone who wants to become Jewish does not have that privilege of choosing what they want to observe and what they don't want, or what they identify with and what they don't, what they believe in and what they don't. They do not have that choice. If somebody wants to join to become Jewish, they have to take the whole package. I tell you, I don't envy them. They need to do stuff I don't do, right? My status as a Jew is not questioned, no matter what. Someone becoming Jewish, it's a serious stuff. That's why we discourage people becoming Jewish. It's a bad idea. Honestly, it's a bad idea to really be taking upon oneself so much. That being said, of course, if someone is serious, devoted, interested, and realistic, then of course it's doable, it's reachable, and we have even examples in our little community of people who did go through conversion and are now Jewish as everybody else is. Sorry, yes?
Well, I understand that for them, for the converted people, for people who want to convert, this is a bit of a nuisance to be sent away 3 times. But this is completely logical, to test their sincerity.
Mm-hmm.
And what my mother has told them, and that what you tell them, is also completely logical. When you come to the Taiwanese and say, I want to become Taiwanese, but you got the wrong face! That's much more insulting.
You're saying they're following their protocol, though.
Well, the protocol stinks!
Yeah, I agree. I tend to agree. Yeah. Racism is not part of Judaism, I could tell you. It doesn't say anywhere.
I accept Naomi, and I wonder why Ezra's wife doesn't accept me.
And it doesn't say anywhere whether they are, different facial gesture or skin color. It doesn't say anywhere about one's Jewishness having to do with their appearance or the way they're formed. But
there was some problem with the Ethiopian Jews that they accepted, I understand, but still not all rabbis accept.
The Ethiopian Jews, that's also a misconception. People think, and this is a very Western thing, that, and it is true, by the way, racism does exist in all colors and forms and shapes, right? But a Western thing is to look at black people inferior. It's inherent. I'm not coming to say something you don't know. Nothing to do with Judaism or Jewishness or God or any of that sort. It's just inherent that black people are often looked as inferior, and people make that mistake that when people came from Ethiopia, they were questioned with their Judaism. It has nothing to do with their skin color. The issue with the Ethiopian Jews was because they were far off from Jewish civilization. They were not able to keep record of their marriages, divorces, and whether or not they intermarried, whether they always kept to themselves marrying only Jewish people. And because we're not talking about 20 or 30 or 50, we're talking about centuries and centuries that they were disconnected. When they came to Israel, the chief rabbinate said, we look at you as a part of us, but in order to be genuinely a part of the Jewish people, you must convert, because we don't know, you don't have a record of who married whom, and you could have been a very pious person, but one's mother is not Jewish, and of course that requires conversion. And that's the reason why Ethiopian Jews are still left in that limbo. Those that were serious and interested right away went ahead and did that conversion, which was a no-brainer, because a lot of them came with the traditions, with the customs, and with a lot of this stuff. So to them it was no-brainer. Unfortunately, some of the people felt it was an insult to ask them to convert, although the reasoning was given. It wasn't, as I said, it wasn't, because you're black and we don't think, or whatever, this was never the case. So some people did not want, and they rejected the idea, and therefore the status is still up in question over their Jewishness. Those who are interested will go to the rabbinate and go through a conversion, which to them, again, is not such a big deal. Okay, let's look at the world. We were talking last week about the world as a garden.
Can I get a short, simple question?
Sure. Finally, you ask a question. You're always nodding with your head. I don't know whether you're listening or you're just nodding. Yeah. Yes.
Listening.
Yeah, I know you're listening.
This is an interesting subject matter.
You're a great listener, I could say.
Oh. Sorry. As a practical matter, or modernly, isn't it so that an important or a large percentage of people who decide to convert do it on account of a marriage? That is, I think among the people I'm acquainted with here in Taiwan, there's several instances in which we have converted Jews, and if we look at the statistics among that group, then the interest in converting is to fulfill the requirements for marriage. So, is that generally true? You enumerate, being interested and various other reasons besides preparing for a marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Is preparing for marriage not the majority of conversions, modernly speaking?
Okay, it's a good question, and the answer is as following. Initially, and that's why Maimonides writes as well, somebody coming to become Jewish, you ask them, what do you want to become Jewish for? If they say, I want to marry a Jew, you tell them, get lost. This is not happening. Jews marry Jews, and non-Jews marry non-Jews. This isn't happening. Though, with recent generations, and a lot of people being intermarried, right? They go marry out of the faith. The rabbinate, both in Israel and in the United States, in Australia, in England, France, other big Jewish communities, decided to shift their paradigm a little bit. And to answer your question, the answer is yes, there are a great deal of people coming to convert because of marriage, but, and this has to be said, I know from our individual cases here in Taiwan, for the rabbis to consider the candidate for conversion, it's no longer a journey of he or she, for the most part it was she, has to go through. It is also their partner has to be a part of that. In other words, if a Taiwanese woman, for instance, wants to become Jewish, and in order to become Jewish, she has to fulfill all the laws. But the person who she is bound to get married to and share her life with is not necessarily interested in fulfilling the laws. This is a big problem. Her conversion process...
The male usually...
Exactly. if he's not interested, if I tell him, hey, Joe, come to prayers, and he said, Rabbi, I'm not religious, I don't go to prayers, and I say, hey, Joe, don't eat pork, and he says, Rabbi, I'm not religious, I eat what I want. Well, they don't relinquish their Jewishness, they remain Jewish. But somebody like that is not the ideal partner for someone who is converted. So the rabbis instituted in recent generations, yes, you want to become Jewish for marriage purposes, this is doable, but it's no longer a solo, it's a duet. You have to come with your partner and make a process which your partner doesn't necessarily become Jewish because they're already Jewish, but yes, they need to become observant in order to create that security net in which you, the candidate, will actually observe Torah and mitzvahs and become a proper Jewish person, right? So this is how the paradigm shift was, that instead of saying, oh, you just want to marry someone, this isn't a legitimate excuse, in which now it's like, you want to marry someone, okay, let's see who this person is, and let's see if we could garner and harness their support to the process, and then we're winning. This is a win-win situation because you have another Jewish family in part of the community, right? This is now becoming not an individual who goes on a journey, but a family together. And this, of course, increases everything, right? It's a win-win thing. So, yes, it is true that in recent generations, but there are quite a lot of cases of people who convert regardless of marriage, both men and women. Basically a lot of them go to Israel because in Israel you have the infrastructure is very suitable, for people who want to convert. You have different institutes and different seminaries and different programs for different ages, and people, even from Taiwan, we had a lady, if you remember Shlomo's wife, she actually converted much before she met him. She became Jewish, and only later they met. So yeah, there are institutions in Israel for people wanting to convert, and that's regardless of marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Yeah.
So here we have such a wonderful example of this ideal couple, as you said, that's Adam and Naomi.
Correct.
And when I first met Naomi, I saw her trying to read, and I asked her, you want to convert? She said, yes. I said, are you doing it for somebody or just for your own interest? She said, I started with somebody, but now I'm genuinely interested. You know how much I respect her.
Yeah, absolutely.
And she didn't tell me, I don't understand you Chinese, as somebody else.
Hey Josh, no comments on conversion, Josh? I thought it's a topic that's explosive sometimes to people. No comment. Okay.
I don't have to worry about it for myself, so.
No, I worry very much because with my plans, I need to become more observant.
Yes. Well, regardless of it. Okay, here's what the Rebbe says. Marty, this time turn to this wall because I changed the location. There are boxes here.
For me.
I know the boxes. I couldn't. Yeah. Trust me, packing this room is confusing. Okay, Basi Legani. Here's what the Rebbe says. This is a medrash. I have come to my garden, my sister, my bride. A pasuk, a verse from Song of Songs. The midrash notes it doesn't say garden, rather it says my garden. In other words, to my home, to my abode. That's abode. Yeah, abode. To the place where I once resided. For in the beginning, God's essence was found in this world. Okay, the Rebbe Ayatz is telling us, you should know, this is what the Medrash is saying, when God comes to give us the Torah, we're going to read about it on Shabbat. By the way, are you busy? Shabbat, this is going to be the last time we'll have a minyan here. We're moving. So this is going to be the last minyan here. Bezrat Hashem. But we want to make a minyan because we're reading the 10 Commandments. Are you busy Saturday? Could you come around 11? Okay, check if you're available. It'll be great. So we'll make minyan for the very last time with this equipment. I don't know if you saw the new shul, but it's much nicer than what we have.
I miss this place, to be honest with you.
Well,
I'm
living so many memories. I'm telling you. I've been packing the whole week, and this is crazy.
You don't know what you're missing. In the new place.
Don't worry, we'll try to.
Beautiful, but I like this.
We'll create the vibe. We'll create the vibe. But I need you to help me create it, right? I can't do it on my own. Remember, this is not credited to me. It's credited to all the beautiful people coming here. Okay, so this is what the Rebbe says. When you look around at the materialism and the coarseness of the physical world which surrounds you, you might become anxious and afraid. What is happening to the world? Things seem to deteriorate from generation to generation, from year to year. Goodness and holiness don't seem to be gaining the upper hand. The opposite seems to be the case. This is especially true regarding the state of the Jewish people, who are always the smallest among the nations. The situation doesn't seem to get better, right? Doesn't seem to be getting better. It seems like people drift away from their tradition. People intermarry. A lot of things going on. Things go out of control. 6-year-old kids are having shotguns and shooting their babysitters in America. Massacres all over the place. The world is not a good place. Okay, that's the impression. You open up your eye and you see the world is not a good place. From a rational perspective, we can make the mistake of seeing the world as a jungle where wild beasts rule the landscape. It doesn't seem to be an orchard, a positive place which produces delicious fruit from human consumption. You could easily become discouraged and indifferent. What hope is there to make a difference, you'll think, when the situation seems to get worse from generation to generation and from year to year? You don't believe me? Open the newspaper. Look at any news website in any language. You won't find a lot of encouraging things. Okay, now, of course, the media doesn't like to write good news. For some reason, good news don't sell. I still didn't get to the bottom of it.
It's the good books.
That I'm not sure. I still didn't get to the bottom of it. Why good news don't sell?
Have you tried to publish in the States?
Okay, I haven't tried to publish any books. I'm not as talented as you are,
Speaking from experience.
Okay. So here's how the world looks in our eyes. Let's look at what the Medrash is telling us. God says, the world is my orchard. The message of the previous Rebbe in his discourse addresses this very point. The previous Rebbe himself underwent the most difficult situations. He experienced all 4 categories of suffering for which a person must thank God upon survival. Even when he finally arrived in a safe heaven, the United States of America, where he was no longer under threat, he suffered both spiritually and physically. There's no need to dwell on it at length. Everybody who reads a little bit of the history of the Rebbe would see what a hard life he had. Nonetheless, he taught this most amazing teaching in the days and years which followed. I have come to my garden, the world which he lived in, despite its external appearances, was a garden. Not a field which produces sustenance, but a garden which produces fruit. It is not just anyone's garden. It isn't owned by someone who is not particular of its quality. It's a garden of which God says that it's my garden. It is God's garden and orchard. And it is not only his temporary possession, it is his home, the place where his deepest essence is most comfortable. Okay, so here it is. The Rebbe lays out very simply, this place is not a jungle, this is an orchard, this place is God's garden. This is where he comes out to the garden to breathe fresh air and to enjoy sweet and tasty, delicious fruits. Now what's going on? Okay, so the side is the world. It looks like a jungle, but you say it's an orchard. Regardless of whether or not you understand it, you can connect with this truth knowing that it is stated in the Torah of truth as transmitted in his teaching right before his passing. And it gives you the ability to look at the world with a different perspective. Okay, sometimes we see things, we perceive it. The way we perceive things, the way we grasp it is according to our outlook. The way we look at things, right? That's what we see. But if we look at the Torah, which is truth, Torah is truth and the words of Torah are truth, we see that, in fact, the relationship between God and this world is not of a jungle, but the contrary of a garden. Within this newfold attitude, you will notice things that you wouldn't have noticed in first glance when you were looking superficially. Now you will know what to look for, and you will look in that direction. You will look to uncover that which is hiding under the external shell, the fruits of the garden. So once you come out and you have that assumption, and I agree, it's not easy to see it, and it often looks the other way around. But if you say the Torah tells me that this world is a place that is called God's garden, and a garden is a good place, a positive place, once you come out to the world with this notion in mind, you actually start seeing how this is a garden. Which is, of course, a very famous saying used also outside the Jewish world. And the saying goes like this: when you believe you can't, you're right. When you believe you can, you're right. In other words, it's all a matter of how you approach it. If you approach something saying, forget it, this is not going to work, this is not going to change, this is not going to make a difference, I'll never do it, I'll never make it, it's impossible, it's beyond me, it's beyond my capacity, it's just too big, it's too strong, it's too powerful, it's not me, I can't do it. You know what? You're right. You couldn't do it. You won't be able to do it. But if you believe you can, you're also right. That means you could do it, and you will do it. So the perspective, the glasses, if you wish, that God is giving us through this discourse of the Rebbe is, the world is my garden. I'd like you to look at it in this way. When you search with this attitude, you could first of all be assured that you will find what you're looking for, being that the Torah of truth declares that it is so. Secondly, in your confidence that you will find precious treasures, fruits to which God attests that they are from His garden and abode. You won't be afraid of hard work, and difficulties won't cause you to be sidetracked by other affairs, because you know that a precious treasure awaits you. The opportunity to reveal how this world is God's garden, the opportunity to reveal that God's essence is in this world. Yes?
A comment and a question.
Yes.
A comment on convincing yourself you can't do it. I have a beautiful example.
Okay.
You convince yourself you will never learn the Chinese tongue.
Oh, I said they don't exist. I didn't convince. How could I learn something that doesn't exist, right?
Oh, so it's not just you denying the epistemology, you're denying the metaphysics, the reality of it.
Oh, you. I don't know if I should go further with my joke, but I don't know. I mean, I've been outside in the street today. Whatever.
I just think that you really convince yourself it's too difficult, but it's not. It's just you convince yourself.
Yeah, you're right. I agree.
I know it's a joke too. I know that.
Yeah.
And the question is serious. The oral Torah, you often tell us that what is written there is correct, but we still have to know the interpretations, etc., etc. Up to when is this? Does, for example, what the Rebbe says here is it also included in the oral Torah?
Absolutely. The Rebbe relays words directly from Torah. You could see the way he speaks, you could see the topics he's discussing, and you could see what he deduces from. You know, everybody could open a book, start reading from it, and then give you a hak and chinik type of thing that you don't know what's going on, right? The result is the test. If somebody wants to say, I got this great invention, or I have this great theory, and you say, okay, let me hear it. Let me hear what it is. And you have to bring it into the test of reality. Remember, when Hasidism appeared, this is the time of the Baal Shem Tov, we're talking about 300 years ago, and a lot of people were afraid of it. They said, what is this thing? What are you telling all these interpretations in Torah? What's going on? Who are you to start deviating from the traditions we have? But 300 years later, you could see the people who study Hasidus, the people who practice Hasidus, they're actually making the Torah alive, bringing it to life. So the way the Rebbe relays, to answer your question, whether the words of the Rebbe are written, whether they're considered in the oral Torah, you could see by the test of reality. What the Rebbe says, he encourages us, he imbues us with positive thinking, he enforces us and empowers us to become who we are, and you could see by the results of his actions that indeed it actually only complemented God's world and brought more light into the world.
But I have the impression that you are doing the same here.
Doing the same as what?
As here.
Oh.
Making Torah alive.
Yeah, that's what we have. That's our job. All of us.
What you are saying is also part of the oral.
I'm humbled. You're very kind. You're very kind.
No, it's not just, if I think bad of somebody is said bad of somebody. I just said something bad about you. Just 3 minutes ago.
Yeah.
But when I say positive, that's from the heart.
Good. Baruch Hashem. It's I reciprocate. So when you go out in the world and you ask what's going on and you hear only bad news, don't be discouraged. Don't question your ability to fulfill your mission. Remember that this reality exists only among those who look at the world with eyes of flesh and blood. But those who follow the verse, raise your eyes to the heaven and see who created these. They first look up to the heavens and recognize that the world is God's garden and orchard, God's abode. So what happens is, Hashem is telling us, I'd like you to look at this world the way I'm looking at it. I'd like you to know that when it's difficult, when it's challenging, that's when you grow. I remember I found my, in Hebrew we call it Tu'udat Bagut. It's a high school certificate. When you finish high school, graduation, high school graduation, you get the certificate. What did you do in math and physics and history? And right, it's the same in America. It's what is it called? They have matrix? No, not matrix.
We have transcript.
Transcript. Okay, after you finish 12th grade. What year did you finish 12th grade? 1705.
Thanks a lot.
You know it comes from my heart. Anyway.
1705, there was still the British in America.
Oh, there's still British in America. I think there's still British in America now as well. Anyway, so I found my high school transcript. That's how you call it. And I saw my PE. You know, I was really good. I mean, I'm humbled, but I was really good at physics, math, chemistry, biology. Those were my topics. I like computer science. You know, coding. Those are the things I like. English, of course. English. I got 96 out of 100. Yeah. So you saw I spoke English back then. It wasn't as close to what I'm speaking now. I didn't know any of the terms I'm using now. But anyway, yeah. So PE, physical education. I got 60. You know, it's really bad. But what can I do? I was never good at sports, right? This has never been my thing. You know, I remember the teacher and I were always getting into into arguments. It was just not my thing. Anyways, so one of the things though, I did study something for sports. So they built like a little gym in our high school, and it wasn't fancy, but one of the things. And I remember them explaining to us how it works when you actually exercise. And I remember we were using, you know, not weightlifting like this, but you know those the little weights you do like this.
Dumbbells.
What are they called? Dumbbell. Okay. So I remember the teacher for PE explaining to us, and he says, how much you could do? And you tell him, I could do 20. Just to do 20, you do 20. And then after you get to 20, and you feel like you can't do anymore, that's when you need to do 3 or 4 more. And he says to you, when you feel like you can't do anymore, and you're doing more, that's when your muscle grows. That's when the muscle becomes strong, right? And then you feel like you've exhausted everything in it, and you continue maybe 2 or 3 more, right? Not 10 more, because otherwise you'll be hurting yourself for no purpose. You'll do a little more, and that's when it grows, and next week you can actually progress and move forward, right? So when it hurts, when you feel like it's impossible, and you give that little push, that's when you grow. That's when you actually make it into something in reality. You see, I still got 60. I remember that. I didn't practice. I remember the theory very well. But kidding aside, I started exercising not too long ago, and I feel like I could really use more exercise in my life. But you know, the theory remained. I remember the theory very well on how it's done. So it is like this. God says, I want you to know the world is not a bad place. It's not a corrupt place, as people like to say. It is my garden, my orchard. When you go out in this way, you could start seeing things, and things would match that image you have on the world. Slowly you will see, you smile, and people will smile at you back. You do good, and good comes back to you, right? And even if somebody says something negative or does something negative, you can't fight negativity with negativity. You could, for the first thing, you feel sorry for this person, right? Bursting on you in the middle of nowhere. you go to the bank, you want to get something, and somebody's really having a bad day, and you didn't do anything, and they're still, all over the place. You feel sorry for the guy, right? You say he's probably having a really bad time, so you feel sorry for the guy. You can't hate the guy because you feel sorry for him. And second, you could diffuse everything, right? If you use positive energy, positive spirit, you'll see. This is how, and then you'll discover that the world is actually an orchard. It's really a garden of God. You wanted to say something, or no? You wanted to say something? Yeah.
We're in the same boat. I also always hated sports. From high school, before high school, and till now.
Yeah.
Secondly, the etymology of the word sport. The word sport originally meant hobby.
Hobby.
Yes. Like for example, we say hunting for sport. Hunting for sport means just because I wish to kill animals, not because I'm really starving and I need their meat. So hunting for sport. And then we should distinguish between the exercise, which is really, really useful, although I hate it too. But I know that's my personal shortcoming. I do climb mountains sometimes.
You should join Marty. He goes hiking.
Yeah, that's what I mean, not Everest. And sports as a mass culture being brainwashed. A few days ago we had a guy here who said that there was the greatest news in the world. There was some Serbian tennis player who was...
Arthur
like
said, yeah.
He could not even remember his name. His hero's name. Well, his hero's name I know. It comes from the word joke. So the whole thing is a joke. And I thought maybe addiction to sports led to growing muscles inside the skull.
The truth is that what you were saying first is true, that we need to make sure our body's healthy, and just like we need to eat and sleep.
Watching somebody from the couch.
Yeah. Watching a game of sport doesn't make you any more of a, you exercise. That's very helpful and very good and very positive. Okay, so exactly the Rebbe says we need to see the garden, but how exactly is this working? Here's what the Rebbe is telling us in the second part of the Sikha. This is our weekly portion. Moses' father-in-law Yitro, the chieftain of Midian, heard all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, his people, and the Lord had taken Israel out of Egypt. Just to give you an introduction, remember Moses had to flee from Egypt when Pharaoh wanted to kill him. It was after Moses was brought up in Pharaoh's palace. He goes out and he kills the Egyptian. Remember that story? The Egyptian was abusing an Israeli, a Jewish fellow, Israelite, not Israeli. Israel didn't exist then, or whatever it's called, the land of Canaan. And the Egyptian was hurting him and really abusing him in a horrible way after he raped his wife. Then he abused the husband. Moses turned around, he saw there was no one there, and he killed the Egyptian. Brought justice, right? Avenging. He brought justice. The second day he comes out, and he sees two people fighting. He says, "Why are you fighting?" What did they tell him? Remember what they told him? "Who the hell do you think you are? Are you going to tell us what to do? And what if we don't listen? Are you going to kill us like you killed the other guy yesterday?" Jews, they know the news. Everything is, that joke that the king heard that the Jews know everything, right? The king, he told his advisor, "How come the Jews know everything?" And they said, "We don't know." So the king he dressed up in, simple clothing, and he went to the synagogue for the prayer. And as he walks in, somebody goes, "Psst, I heard the king is coming today." I heard the king is coming, right? How did they know? How did they know? Anyway, so they said to him, "Who are you?"
That was Mossad, already.
"Who are you? Are you going to kill us like you killed the guy yesterday?" And then Moses realizes, apparently, it's no longer a secret. Pharaoh wants to kill Moses, and Moses runs away. First, he was captured before running away, and they put the sword on his neck, and his neck stiffened, became like marble, right? And the sword broke, and everybody were like completely, taken aback. What's going on? And that gave Moses the opportunity. He fled. He ran away from Egypt. He ran to Midian. And in Midian he met his wife, Zipporah, and his father-in-law, Jethro, right? And then the burning bush. You remember the burning bush, right? You remember that from Hebrew school? Right? In California?
I remember from someplace.
From Hebrew school in California?
I don't remember exactly where it was.
From when you were in Hebrew school, California, 14th century?
Yeah, well, that's about right.
I said you graduated in 17th century. Anyway.
Swami, don't make so much fun of California. Even they have their positive things.
Well, Josh is a positive thing of out of California. So I have, and so is Marty.
Last time he told me quite a few things about,
he wants to help you.
I'm not supposed to claim to be Taiwanese.
He said it on your favor. He likes you. I know he does.
That's not the point. When I lived in California, somewhere in the mid-90s, I found there were still yellow pages.
When you say mid-90s, you need to tell me what century mid-90s.
The last century. The century.
The previous century.
Yeah, the first century. So, I found still there was Yellow Pages book, and I found there was the Jewish Center in Oakland. So I went there and asked them, 20 years ago, I remember I lived in New York, and I went to the Israeli consulate, and they gave me a yellow book, good Hebrew textbook. Do you have anything like that? They immediately pulled out, Elef Milim, that's what you want. Well, that was efficient.
Good.
And they copied it for me, and they gave me a copy.
Good. Baruch Hashem.
And so I reviewed my Hebrew.
So the burning bush, remember, God reveals himself to Moses, says, I am the Lord. You need to go back to Egypt and bring the Jews out of there, right? So Moses hears the commandment, goes to Egypt, going to take his family, wife and 2 children. When they come near Egypt, Aaron, the brother, comes out to Moses and says, wow, thank you for coming. We're waiting for you. There's a message from God, he said. And he says, who are these? He says, this is my wife and my 2 kids. He said, don't bring them into Egypt. It's a war zone. Everybody's enslaved. Everybody's tortured. Send them back. So Moses parts from his wife and kids, and they go back to Midian, where it's nice and safe, right? So they were not at risk of anything. When Moses finishes his assignment in Egypt, his father-in-law comes to meet him with his wife and 2 children. So Jethro hears what happens, and he goes to meet Moshe. Now, what is the real meaning of this, what he heard? So here's what the Gemara is telling us. Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, the chief trainer of Moses, of Midian, heard that all that God had done for Moses. What did he hear that made him come and convert? His father-in-law wanted to become Jewish, right? After everything that had happened, he wanted to become Jewish, right? So the Talmud explains to us that he comes to become Jewish, and indeed, this was something understood. The Jews were on high. Remember, this is after Exodus, after the Egyptian empire completely fell apart into crumbles. The mightiest king Pharaoh was dead, and all of his empire was liquidated. Everything was gone, and nobody wanted to touch the Jews, right? The water split for them, God coming down to giving them the Torah. You would want to be Jewish. I tell you, if you were Taiwanese at that time, you would probably say, where do I fill in an application? I want to become Jewish, right? So obviously it's understood that Jethro wanted to become Jewish over everything they had, right? They had the clouds protecting them, they had the water going with them. But indeed, when somebody wants to become Jewish, here's what the Gemara says. The sages taught in a Braita with regards to a potential convert who comes to a court in order to convert at present time. When the Jews are in exile, the Jewish court says to him, what did you see that motivated you to come to convert? Don't you know that the Jewish people are in present time are anguished, suppressed, despised, and harassed, and hardships are frequently visited upon them? Haven't you been reading the news? Everybody are after the Jews. What do you want to put yourself into this, right? This is clear text.
It's in Texas 3 days ago.
In Texas?
Yes.
I heard something. There's somebody wanted there was a hostage situation, or
Yes.
but it was all resolved, wasn't it? Thank God.
They killed that hostage taker.
Oh wow.
The cops.
Yeah. I heard something. My wife told me the other day about it.
Real terrible.
Place called Colleyville.
Colleyville. Okay.
Small town in Texas, I think.
Yeah. Listen, I mean, America is not so safe. It used to be safer than. It's
For everything.
Huh?
For everything.
Yeah, I guess you're right. For everything. Yeah. You're absolutely right. It's no longer. It's not our problem or anybody. It's everybody's problem, right?
Yeah.
But the world is a garden. It's an orchard.
Après nous le déluge.
Ah?
Après nous le déluge.
Après nous the deluge. Après nous, after us.
Even the flood. I don't care.
Ah.
So you know what's the background of this saying?
No.
It was Louis XIV.
Ah, Louis XIV. Yeah.
Yes. And his advisors told him, "You're crazy. You're bleeding the country to death with your taxes and building Versailles, everything else." And he said, "Après nous le déluge. Nothing will happen in my lifetime."
Uh-huh.
His grandson got his head cut off.
Uh-huh.
He was right. After him. That was after.
There's I remember the old American Polish Jewish woman going to visit the museum in France, the Louvre, and there's this chair, with red velvet, and she's walking, she's excruciated from everything going around, tired, and she sits to rest on that chair, right? This is famous chair, Louis XIV's chair, and this lady runs from the other side of the museum, says, lady, you can't be sitting here. Says, why? This is Louis XIV's chair. She says, okay, when Louis will come, I'll get up. When he'll come back, I'll get up.
I have a question about the historicity of the crumbling of the Egyptian Empire.
Yes.
I understand that the Romans finally finished it in the times of Cleopatra. She was the last pharaoh. Of a female. So, but that was like 1,000 years after or more after.
Yeah, we had no interest in dissolving Egypt. We just had to leave from there. The fact that 600,000 men, which alludes to a few million people, left Egypt in such a storming way, already ruined the potential, ruined the reputation of the Egyptians and the Egypt Empire.
But not really the...
Yeah, well, there was no interest in a lot of people died, Pharaoh died, I guess they had time to rebuild if they wanted.
That's like after 6-Day War.
Yeah.
After the 6-Day War, that was a little defeat.
So this poses a question. We just said, for the last 15 minutes, that the world is a garden, it's an orchard, everything is good, it depends how you look, and God says, I chose this place. Well, wait a second. It says in the Gemara, somebody wanting to become Jewish, you don't tell them all those good things. You said you're crazy, everything is bad, we don't have any money, everybody's after us, we're harassed, we're anguished, we're suppressed, did you just say that the world is a garden, and now you're telling me that it's not? You have to make up your mind, right? That's an apparent contradiction to what we just said. Here's what the Rebbe explains. The previous service teaching that the world is God's garden seems to contradict the Talmud's instruction for a convert. The Talmud states that when a person wishes to convert to Judaism, we are to tell him, don't you know that the Jewish people are despised and harassed? In other words, a basic condition to becoming Jewish is to know what every Jew knows, that the Jewish people are persecuted and harassed. As long as the individual withholds his conversion, he won't be subject to that fate. But if he desires to convert, he must recognize and accept upon himself the fate of being persecuted, harassed, and despised. Don't these two ideas contradict each other? Why would we see the world as a garden if the Torah defines our basic existence as one of persecution and suffering? Isn't that a good question? Decide, you have to make up your mind. You just said it's a garden, but then you say, wait a second, somebody wanting to join, right? You tell them this is no picnic, right? The world is is there a saying in English? The world is no picnic? Yeah, that's yeah. So you say, hey, this isn't like you think it is. So, is this a garden or are we persecuted? All right, that's a good question. Here's what Maimonides says.
That's where you go
Good idea. Okay, on this topic, there's something amazing about Maimonides. Maimonides dedicates several chapters in the Guide to the Perplexed. By the way, it's a beautiful book. You should get that in English. There's I forgot, they probably sell it on Amazon. And it's a beautiful book. I read some of it in Hebrew, and I know the English translation is quite okay. I guess there's some versions, but if you want, it's you ever heard the Guide to the Perplexed? You ever heard of that book by Maimonides?
Say again?
The Guide
The guide, no.
to the Perplexed. You never heard of that book? And Maimonides wrote it 850 years ago. It's about, you remember Maimonides, right?
I think he only
By
met his,
name.
But
I think he only met his son.
okay, it's a beautiful book. Maimonides writes, The Guide to the Perplexed. Here's it. So he dedicates several chapters to tell us how we should perceive the world. Should we view it as a place where evil forces dominate and conclude that it is quite far from being a garden or orchard? Or should we view it positively as the orchard of God himself, and that despite the fact that God has many worlds to choose from, he chose this mundane and physical world to be his home? His conclusion is that a Jew who follows the dictates of Torah must view the world in a positive light, with hope and with confidence about the future, as he explained there at length. Okay, so you read what Maimonides writes, and he says the world is a great place, it's a good place. But, you know, Maimonides' own life was far from being garden or orchard. He went through so much suffering, so many hardships, such a hard time, and yet he could still see how the world is a garden. Yes?
What does it mean, many worlds? Is there like only one universe, only one God, etc., etc.?
There is one God. There are many worlds. Yes, there's the physical world and the spiritual world, right? Yeah.
Well, but to choose to dwell in many worlds, first of all, many is not two. Many is more than two. I
Yeah,
think.
there are numerous levels in the spiritual world. Yeah.
Okay, I
Yeah.
get that.
Yeah.
So because it sounds like the test scientists are toying with the idea of parallel universes.
No.
I don't buy that.
No. There's the physical world and the spiritual worlds. That's in plural. There are many, many worlds. Hashem has worlds, creates worlds, destroys worlds, and yet he decided he wants to dwell in this world, in the physical world. But, so remember, Maimonides writes everything is right. But in his correspondence, there's a letter which he describes the story of his life and his daily schedule. It is evident that he suffered immensely. Even when he reached the peak of his greatness, when he served as the Sultan's court, he suffered quite literally. He was physically weak and overwhelmed with responsibilities. Throughout most of the day, he was occupied with matters which were very distant from the matters in which he found his true passion and pleasure, which are intellectual pursuits. In his own writings, and especially in the Guide to the Perplexed, he extols the virtues of intellectual engagement, describing it as the pinnacle of human accomplishment. It is quite evident that this is where he found his greatest joy and pleasure. Okay, so he liked to study, he wants to study, but he can't study because he's so busy. He was the doctor, and many people came to him. Remember we told the story about, it was the Ibn Ezra who came to him, and he sent him someplace, so he cried, and then the tears actually helped him with cleansing, and that helped him with his eye condition. In any event, Maimonides went through a very hard life, and yet, despite his hardness, despite everything he had, he still managed to see the world as a garden. And now comes the question of where to find joy. This life of a Jewish leader and Guide for the Perplexed is a reflection of the life of the entire Jewish people. The Torah of truth testifies that the Jewish people in our day before the coming of the redemption are persecuted and harassed. Indeed, this is even a fundamental tenet of Judaism which must be internalized by every convert. Nonetheless, the Jewish people are commanded to serve God with joy. Since this demand for joy comes from the Torah, and it is a commandment, not only a suggestion, we must conclude that we have what to be joyous about. The Torah does not make unrealistic demands, being, as mentioned, the Torah of truth. But our question, of course, is not solved. On one on one hand, we say we live in a garden and an orchard. This place is a beautiful place of delight for God. And on the other hand, Torah tells us before coming of Mashiach, things are not really going well. And how could Maimonides tell us to look at the world in a positive manner while his own life, as he described them, were far from being with serenity and peace of mind? So here's what the Rebbe tells us. It's all about perspective. The answer can be derived from the opening words of the discourse, I have come to my garden. These words tell us that before we enter the world, God enters first. He establishes the world as his dwelling place, the place where his essence resides. Being that we find ourselves with God in the same home, the fact that we are persecuted or harassed becomes entirely irrelevant. How exactly is that irrelevant? Look at what the Rebbe says, an interesting parable. During a moment of immense pleasure, a person does not notice the bite of a fly. It is not that the bite doesn't exist. It's just that he doesn't feel it because he's overwhelmed with the immense experience of being together with God under one roof. When we speak with a non-Jew before a potential conversion, we cannot yet perceive this feeling. Therefore, we must not deceive him. He must be told that from a materialistic perspective, the Jewish people are persecuted and harassed. But that is only because he can't yet appreciate the power of God's presence. Okay? What happens is that someone who is, let's just say, and it happens sometimes, I think somebody told me, I remember when that was, many years ago. This was 2002. 2002, I lived... ancient history, 20 years ago. You imagine, 2002 is 20 years ago. It used to be that we said 30 years ago, we meant the 1970s. Today, when you say 30 years ago, you mean 1992. Isn't that amazing? How time flies. So, 2002, I was in Israel, in Yeshiva in Kiryat Gat, and we were going every Friday. In the Chabad Yeshiva, you study the whole week, and on Friday, everybody goes out to put tefillin with people. We have those, cars taking every group of 5, 6, 10 people going to a certain place, a different city. Some people stay within the city, but it's a small town in Israel called Kiryat Gat in the south of Israel. And some people go, I used to go to Dimona, which is slightly a bigger city. It's about 45 minutes drive. And everybody has their route, or route or route?
Okay.
Both okay.
Both okay.
The correct word is route, but the Americans pronounce it route.
Route. So I had my permanent route every Friday, and I had a few shops, and there was this furniture shop, very nice furniture. I didn't know much about furniture, but I remember the owner was a very nice person. Every time he used to put on tefillin with us, and he tells me the story about this beautiful table they brought from Italy, right? Beautiful wood design and everything, and he says about this couple who bought a new house, and they wanted the best table, the nicest table, and they bought this table. It's right there, right? And he says, don't ask. We sell on the table, and they're so excited, and they go home, and the movers bring the table, and in the process of the move, there was a little dent in the wood, a little scratch, a little dent. They returned the table, right? Because it was responsibility of the store, because they actually shipped it, delivered it, supposed to install it, whatever. They returned, and he says, I'm not getting it. He says, it's such a beautiful table, and everything is right. So you have a little bit of a dent. What's the big deal, right? Obviously, he understood it, and that's why he took it back and gave back their money. But sometimes, you're in a situation, everything goes well, and there's this little thing, and it annoys you, like, what's going on? Why would it annoy you so much, right? And it's not supposed to annoy you. So here's what the Rebbe brings as a parable. Nudni. Like, this is like telling a businessman worth millions of gold coins, not bitcoins, gold coins. This is, mind the language. He's worth millions of gold coins that he lost a copper penny today. The man will look at you like you're a total fool. What value is there to a single penny when you know that he earned millions of gold coins and in one fell swoop? But that's only true of a person who appreciates the value of gold coins. If you could only appreciate the value of a simple copper coin and have never seen a gold coin in your life, you will only know that a coin, a worn out copper coin, has been lost. So the person coming to report to the wealthy man, he doesn't know millions of gold coins. All he knows are copper coin. One copper coin was lost. To him, whoa. But to the businessman, so what? What's the big deal, right? The fact that Jews are persecuted and harassed is only visible to the non-Jew. It is entirely irrelevant to a Jewish people, comparable to the loss of a single copper penny while simultaneously earning millions of gold coins. Why dwell on the minor loss of a penny when we have earned millions of dollars? Why dwell on the material loss of being a Jew, being harassed and persecuted as you stroll in God's garden? So then why do we tell this person? In the most simple of terms, when a Jew becomes permeated with this idea that the greatest joy is to be with God under the same roof, while everything else is a mere externality, that itself serves as a source for an abundance of blessing in his material matters, with children, good health, and abundant livelihood, allowing him to study Torah and fulfill mitzvah, thereby making this world a home for God amid comfort and peace of mind. This also serves as a preparation and conduit for the imminent messianic era. Indeed, Maimonides writes that the sages and the prophets did not yearn for the messianic era for its side benefit, that goodness will flow in abundance and all delights will be freely available as dust. Rather, that's not what they were interested in. Rather, they desired to be free to involve themselves in Torah, because in that era, knowledge, wisdom, and truth will become abundant as the waters cover the ocean bed. May this happen very soon with the arrival of Mashiach. So the answer to the question is simple. When a non-Jew comes to become Jewish, you have to tell him the truth. The truth is, we're persecuted, we're harassed, things are not the way they're supposed to be and are not going well. But you're not doing something wrong by telling them the truth. You're telling them why. But wait a second, you just said you're in a garden. Yeah, for a non-Jew, they can't see it yet. They're looking from the outside, and what they could see, what they could perceive are, it's either good or bad. But while you're inside, while this person goes through the conversion process and becomes Jewish, then this person could realize, okay, so what if there are physical hardships? So what if it's not going so well? I know that I'm together with God in the same place. I know that I connect to God every time I do a mitzvah, every time I learn Torah, every time that I do something positive. God's presence permeates, penetrates into me, imbued into my physicality, into who I am, to my full essence. What is then is the meaning of having a little bit of discomfort in this world? And indeed, this is the way the Rebbe educated us to look at the world. We're not denying the reality. We're not living in a bubble saying, okay, everything you read in the news is just farce. It's just not true. It's fake news. Fake news, right? We're not there. We're not saying fake news on everything, even things we're not happy to know about and surely not happy to be involved in. And yet, at the very same time, we say, yes, there are hardships. Yes, there are challenges. But what is it worth if I have, instead of these, at the time of these challenges, I could connect myself with the endless energy, the infinite energy of God. I could be penetrated with God in everything I do. So what are these physical hardships in my eyes? They're so not relevant. They're so not important. They're so unappreciated almost. So you say, okay, the world is not exactly the way we plan it to be, but it's still God's garden and God's orchard, and it's only our choice. It's a matter of perspective. If we look at it as a garden, we see how it is really a garden. And just like a garden you cultivate the garden and it grows fruits, and you could benefit from it, and other people could benefit from it too. So too, we look at the world as a garden, we attend to it as a garden, we treat it as a garden, and it becomes more and more of a garden to us and to whoever we come in contact. Looking forward to seeing you in 2 weeks, February 1st, Tuesday, 7 p.m. at the new center, because next Tuesday is moving day. I won't be able to prepare a class let alone give it over. I'll probably be overwhelmed. There are 4 trucks coming in
So
with
no class.
no class next Tuesday.
Last class here.
That was our last class here, all right, yes. So we're looking forward to 2 more weeks, and that will be in the new center, and Josh will have to start creating the vibe, and we'll take whatever we could take from here, but when we came to this place, it was just a stinky basement, so I think we could reenact what was done here, and probably in a greater scale.
There is a beautiful story